The silver ship broke through Earth's atmosphere with a gentle hum that belied its advanced technology. Inside, Ambassador Kallax of the Galactic Confederation clutched the edges of his seat, his 3 sets of eyes blinking rapidly in nervous succession. The readouts on his personal monitor confirmed what he already knew. They were descending into what his people considered the most hostile environment any diplomat had ever voluntarily entered. "Ambassador, we are approaching the landing zone," said Captain Zeal, her voice calm despite the mission's danger. "The humans have prepared a special facility with our atmospheric requirements." Kallax nodded, his pale blue skin shifting to a worried gray. "Remind all personnel, no unprotected exposure to the outside environment under any circumstances. The human world is classified extreme hazard for good reason." The ship landed smoothly on a concrete pad at the newly built interstellar diplomatic compound outside of Denver, Colorado. Through the viewport, Kallax could see humans waiting. They stood casually in the open air, under the deadly radiation of their yellow sun, breathing toxic oxygen, their bodies seemingly unbothered by the crushing gravity. It was both terrifying and fascinating. Jack Miller straightened his tie and tried not to fidget as the alien ship powered down its engines. As head of security for Earth's first extraterrestrial diplomatic visit, he felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Next to him stood Dr. Susan Wright, her attention completely focused on the ship's airlock. "Remember," Susan whispered, "they find our atmosphere corrosive and our gravity painful. No sudden movements." Jack nodded. After 20 years in the Marines, he thought he'd seen everything. Then humanity made contact with the Galactic Confederation 6 months ago, and suddenly he was responsible for protecting visitors who considered Earth a death trap. The ship's door slid open with a soft hiss. After a moment, 3 figures emerged, wearing what looked like streamlined hazmat suits. The tallest, presumably Ambassador Kallax, moved forward with careful, deliberate steps. "Ambassador Kallax," greeted Richard Daniels, Earth's senior diplomat. "Welcome to Earth. We are honored by your presence." The alien ambassador bowed slightly. When he spoke, his words came through a translator at his neck. "The honor is ours. Your people have shown great courage inviting us to your world, and greater courage still by evolving on it." Jack scanned the area, keeping his face professional despite finding the situation somewhat amusing. The aliens acted like they'd landed in hell, yet it was a mild spring day, about 70 degrees with a light breeze. The group moved toward the special building constructed for the alien delegation. It featured adjustable atmospheric controls, reduced gravity generators, and radiation shielding that the aliens had insisted upon. To Jack, it seemed like overkill. But Susan had explained that what humans considered normal would kill most sentient species in minutes. "Your protective structure appears adequate," Kallax said, examining the building. "We appreciate your efforts to accommodate our biological limitations." Richard nodded diplomatically. "We want your stay on Earth to be comfortable and safe." Kallax's translator made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Comfort is not possible on a death world, but safety will suffice." Once inside, the alien delegation seemed to relax slightly. The gravity had been reduced to approximately 60% of Earth normal, and the oxygen content lowered to levels that wouldn't burn alien lungs. Jack and Susan, along with the diplomatic team, wore small breathing masks to compensate. "I must admit," Kallax said as they settled into the conference room, "we were surprised to discover intelligent life on a world with such extreme conditions. Most species evolve in environments much more forgiving." Susan leaned forward, her scientific curiosity piqued. "What makes Earth so unusual compared to other inhabited worlds?" Kallax gestured to one of his aides, who projected a holographic chart. "The average homeworld of Confederation species has approximately half your gravity. Your oxygen levels are toxic to 89% of spacefaring races. Your temperature variations would kill most beings, from your frozen poles to your burning deserts. Even your moderate zones experience fluctuations that would be considered catastrophic elsewhere." Jack couldn't help himself. So we're basically super beings to you? The ambassador's skin shifted to a deep purple. Not a term I would choose, but your physical resilience is remarkable. Your bodies routinely neutralize microorganisms that would cause pandemics on other worlds. You can survive injuries that would be fatal to most species. You can eat foods that would be poisonous to others. Richard shot Jack a look that clearly said to let the diplomats handle this. We hope our differences will prove beneficial to both our peoples. Different evolutionary paths offer different strengths. The meeting continued with discussions of trade, cultural exchange, and the possibility of Earth joining the Galactic Confederation. Jack tried to pay attention, but his mind kept returning to what Calax had said. Humans, the monsters of the galaxy, simply by existing on Earth. As the meeting concluded, Susan approached Jack in the hallway. Fascinating, isn't it? Everything we take for granted is terrifying to them. Jack nodded. Makes you wonder what their worlds are like. Paradise, according to their standards. Gentle gravity, stable temperatures, carefully controlled ecosystems. Susan smiled. They'd probably find them boring. Their conversation was interrupted by a low rumble from outside. Jack recognized it immediately. Just a spring thunderstorm rolling in. But the alien delegation froze in visible panic. What is that disturbance? Calax asked, his translator unable to hide the alarm in his voice. Just thunder, Richard explained soothingly. A weather phenomenon, completely normal and harmless. Your world regularly produces such acoustic violence? Another alien aide was checking readings on a wrist device, his movements jerky with stress. Jack stepped forward. Ambassador, I assure you the building is fully protected from lightning strikes and weather. A brilliant flash lit up the windows, followed by a louder crack of thunder. One of the alien aides dropped to the floor, curling into a defensive ball. Please remain calm, Richard said, maintaining his diplomatic composure. This is a mild storm by Earth standards. Mild? Calax's skin had gone almost white. Your world randomly bombards you with energy discharges and sound waves that can damage sensory organs, and you consider it mild? Susan moved closer to the window. Would you like to observe it? Understanding Earth's weather patterns might help reduce your concerns. The aliens reluctantly approached the window. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the glass with water. Lightning flashed again across the sky. Your young develop on this world? Calax asked softly. In these conditions? Jack thought of his nephew's 6th birthday party last summer. Kids playing in the sprinkler during a warm rain shower, squealing with delight at each thunder rumble. They do. They even play in weather like this. The aliens exchanged looks that needed no translation. They were re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about humans. Perhaps, Ambassador Calax said finally, we have much more to learn about each other than we realized. As the storm continued outside, the first true cultural exchange between Earth and the galaxy began, with humans learning they were the scary ones. 3 weeks after the first meeting, Jack Miller stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his uniform one last time. The small apartment felt different now, knowing he wouldn't see it again for at least 6 months. He picked up the photograph of his parents and sister, tucking it into his bag. Even across the galaxy, he wanted a reminder of home. The news had come as a shock to everyone. Despite their obvious fear of Earth, the Galactic Confederation had been impressed by humanity's adaptability. They wanted a human delegation to visit their central station. Jack, Susan, diplomat Alan Foster, and engineer Olivia Rivera had been selected as Earth's first representatives to leave the solar system. This is either a great honor or they want to study us like lab rats, Jack had joked when he received his assignment. No one had laughed. The alien ship waited at the same landing pad where Ambassador Calax had first arrived. It looked different, now, modified with reinforced sections to accommodate human passengers. Jack arrived just as Susan was saying goodbye to her research team. Ready to be the scary alien? He asked her with a smile. Susan adjusted her glasses. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. My whole career I've wondered what aliens would be like, never thinking we'd be the terrifying ones. Alan Foster joined them, looking perfectly calm in his diplomatic uniform. At 52, he was the oldest member of the delegation and the most experienced negotiator Earth had to offer. Ambassador Calax is waiting inside. They've prepared special quarters for us. Alan lowered his voice. Try not to break anything. They think we're much stronger than we are. Jack raised an eyebrow. We're not? Compared to them, we're like bears in a china shop. Olivia Rivera arrived last, lugging a heavy bag of tools and equipment. The young engineer had been specially selected for her ability to adapt technology across different systems. You won't believe what they told me, she said, dropping her bag with a thud. They've reinforced all the furniture in our quarters to handle our extreme weight. They think we might fall through the floor. The 4 humans exchanged amused glances before boarding the ship. Inside, Ambassador Calax greeted them from behind a protective barrier, his skin a formal shade of blue. Welcome, Earth delegation. We have taken every precaution to ensure your comfort during the journey to Central Station. Please follow the illuminated path to your designated area. The human section of the ship was immediately obvious. Everything looked sturdier, with reinforced materials and thicker construction. The gravity was set to Earth normal, making it uncomfortable for the alien crew to enter unless absolutely necessary. They've given us our own air supply, Susan noted, examining the environmental controls. They're afraid our oxygen levels would damage their respiratory systems. Jack sat on a bench designed to hold at least 3 humans. How long until we reach this central station? About 2 weeks by your measurement, Calax answered through the communication system. We will pass several Confederation worlds on our journey. You may observe them through the viewing ports, though landing would be inadvisable. The journey began smoothly enough. The humans settled into their quarters and adjusted to life aboard an alien vessel. They quickly discovered that the aliens found nearly everything about them alarming. Their strength, their endurance, even their sleep cycles. They think we're entering a death-like state, Susan explained after speaking with the ship's xenobiologist. Most Confederation species take short rest periods throughout their day. Our single long sleep period scares them. On the 5th day, Jack accidentally broke a door when he pushed too hard against the unfamiliar locking mechanism. The news spread quickly through the ship, and soon alien crew members were watching him with a mixture of fear and fascination whenever he moved through common areas. You're becoming a celebrity, Olivia teased. The super-strong human who destroys doors with his bare hands. I barely pushed it, Jack protested. It's not my fault their technology is so fragile. Alan shook his head. Perception becomes reality in diplomacy. We need to be careful about the impression we're making. As promised, the ship passed near several Confederation worlds. The humans gathered at the viewing ports, eager for their first glimpse of alien planets. It's beautiful, Susan whispered, looking at a world of gentle purple oceans and swirling white clouds. Eskar, the Confederation's oldest member world. Jack wasn't impressed. It looks tame. Where are the mountains? The forests? Most species prefer stable, predictable environments, Susan explained. Extreme geography creates unpredictable weather patterns. Olivia snorted. Sounds boring. The next world they passed was even more controlled. A planet of carefully arranged land masses and engineered weather systems. Alan described it as a garden planet. But to Jack, it looked artificial and sterile. Don't any of these species like a challenge? He asked during dinner that evening. That's why they find us so interesting, Susan replied. We evolved on a world that would kill most of them in minutes, and we call it home. On the 10th day of their journey, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. The lighting shifted to a pulsing purple, and alien voices chattered urgently over the communication system. Captain Zeal's voice came through the human quarters speakers. Attention Earth delegation. We are experiencing a drive system malfunction. Please remain in your secured area while repairs are attempted. The humans gathered in their common room as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a sickening lurch. What do you think happened? Jack asked. Olivia was already examining the environmental readouts. Something in the propulsion system. The ship's running on auxiliary power. Alan frowned. Should we offer to help? I doubt they'd accept, Susan said. The ship shuddered violently, cutting off her words. The gravity flickered, and for a moment they all floated before it stabilized again. Captain Zeal's voice returned, now clearly stressed. Earth delegation, we have a situation in the drive core. Radiation levels are rising in that section, making it impossible for our crew to complete necessary repairs. Olivia stood immediately. I can help. What radiation levels are we talking about? When the captain shared the readings, the humans exchanged glances. The levels were dangerous, but not immediately lethal to a human with proper protection. I can fix it, Olivia said confidently. Just show me the systems. The aliens were reluctant but desperate. They provided Olivia with their best protective gear, though it seemed flimsy compared to what she was used to on Earth. Jack insisted on going with her as security. They made their way to the drive core, passing increasingly anxious alien crew members. Inside the engine room, warning lights flashed everywhere. To the aliens, the room was now a death trap. To the humans, it was hazardous but workable. Hold this, Olivia told Jack, passing him a tool as she examined the alien technology. I can see the problem. The radiation shield has shifted, exposing the core coupler. For 40 minutes, she worked in conditions the aliens considered lethal, making repairs that saved the ship. When they returned to the common areas, the alien crew stared at them with new expressions, not just fear but something approaching awe. You entered a radiation zone that would kill my species in minutes, Captain Zeal said later, and you did so voluntarily to help us. Jack shrugged. It's what any human would do. That night, Ambassador Calax informed them that news of their actions had been transmitted ahead to Central Station. The story of the Death World humans who braved lethal radiation was spreading throughout the Confederation. By the time they arrived, every species would be waiting to see these remarkable creatures from Earth. We're going to be like zoo animals, Jack complained. Susan smiled. No, we're going to be diplomats. And I think we just gave Earth the best first impression possible. Central Station hung in space like a giant silver snowflake, its arms stretching outward in perfect symmetry. As the ship approached, Jack pressed against the viewing port, taking in the massive structure that served as the heart of the Galactic Confederation. It's beautiful, he said quietly. Susan stood beside him. Look at the size of it. There must be millions of beings living there. 8 million permanent residents from 67 species, Ambassador Calax confirmed, maintaining a safe distance from the humans. And today, the first humans to ever visit. The news of their arrival had spread faster than their ship. By the time they docked, the entire station seemed to be waiting. The main arrival hall was packed with aliens of all shapes, sizes, and colors, all straining to catch a glimpse of the Death Worlders. They're staring at us like we're monsters, Jack whispered to Alan as they walked down the exit ramp. Alan maintained his diplomatic smile. We're not monsters, we're curiosities. There's a difference. A delegation of Confederation officials waited at the bottom of the ramp. The apparent leader, a tall, blue-skinned being similar to Calax, but with elaborate silver markings, stepped forward. Welcome to Central Station. I am High Counselor Varix. Your journey here is historic. Alan bowed slightly. We are honored by your welcome, High Counselor. Earth looks forward to peaceful relations with the Confederation. The humans were escorted to their quarters through crowds of watching aliens. Jack noticed that they all kept a careful distance, as if the humans might explode or attack at any moment. Their assigned living space was similar to their quarters on the ship, reinforced and adapted for Earth-like conditions. The gravity was higher than the rest of the station, the air richer in oxygen. They've gone to a lot of trouble for us, Olivia commented, testing the strength of a chair by sitting on it heavily. We're the first of our kind they've ever seen, Susan replied. They want to study us as much as negotiate with us. That night, they attended a formal reception. The vast hall was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds, all curious about the humans. Jack found himself surrounded by questions. Is it true your world experiences violent atmospheric disturbances daily? asked a small, hovering creature with gossamer wings. Do you really drink water containing hydrogen? Inquired another, its tentacles quivering with what might have been discussed. Can you actually survive falls from significant heights? A third wanted to know. Jack answered politely, trying not to laugh at how ordinary things on Earth seemed terrifying to these beings. Across the room, he could see Susan deep in conversation with a group of alien scientists, while Alan spoke with high-ranking officials. Olivia was examining the room's technology with open curiosity, much to the alarm of the station's engineers. Not everyone seemed pleased by the human presence. Jack noticed a group of aliens standing apart from the others, their postures rigid with what he interpreted as disapproval. One of them, a tall gray-skinned being with 4 arms, watched the humans with unblinking black eyes. Who are they? Jack asked Ambassador Calax, nodding toward the group. Calax's skin shifted to a worried purple. Members of the purist faction. They believe that species from challenging worlds like yours should be quarantined, not welcomed. They think we're contaminated. They think you're dangerous. Not entirely without reason from their perspective. The next morning, Alan and Susan attended meetings with the Confederation Council, while Jack and Olivia were given a tour of the station. Their guide, a nervous young alien named Mip, led them through areas modified to withstand human presence. This is our central life support hub, Mip explained as they entered a vast chamber filled with humming machinery. It maintains appropriate conditions for all species on the station. Olivia studied the systems with professional interest. Fascinating. You're balancing atmospheres for dozens of different biological requirements. Mip seemed pleased by her understanding. Exactly. Each section of the station has adjustable. A sudden alarm cut him off. Red lights began flashing throughout the chamber, and a voice spoke in several alien languages before switching to English. Attention all residents. Environmental system failure detected. Seek appropriate shelter immediately. Mip's skin paled to an almost transparent white. This is not possible. The systems have redundancies. Jack's security training kicked in immediately. What exactly does this mean for the station? Atmospheric pressure will fluctuate. Temperature will become unstable. For many species, conditions could quickly become lethal. Throughout the station, panic spread. The environmental systems that kept dozens of different species alive in their carefully controlled habitats were failing. For humans, the changing conditions were uncomfortable but survivable. For many others, they were a death sentence. Jack and Olivia raced back toward their quarters, finding the corridors filled with frantic aliens. Some were already collapsing as the air grew thin for their needs. Susan and Alan burst into the human quarters minutes later, their faces grim. This isn't an accident, Alan said. The council received a message claiming responsibility. The purists? Jack guessed. Susan nodded. They said exposing the station to harsh conditions would demonstrate the danger of allowing contaminated species to join the Confederation. They're creating a crisis to prove humans are dangerous? Olivia asked incredulously. No, Alan corrected. They're creating conditions they think will incapacitate us along with everyone else. They don't understand what humans can actually endure. Jack looked around at his teammates. Then let's show them. With the station's regular emergency teams overwhelmed, the humans sprang into action. Jack carried injured aliens to safety through corridors where the air had grown too thin for them to walk. Susan used her knowledge of xenobiology to stabilize victims until their own medics could reach them. Alan made his way to the central command, negotiating with panicking officials to coordinate the response. And Olivia, ignoring the protests of station engineers, entered the damaged environmental control centers that other species could no longer safely access. Working in conditions that the station's inhabitants considered deadly, she identified the sabotage and began makeshift repairs. The aliens watched in amazement as she handled hot components, breathed thin air, and endured pressure changes that would have killed most of them instantly. After 3 hours of frantic work, Olivia managed to restore partial life support to the critical sections of the station. By then, Jack had helped evacuate 2 entire residential sectors, Susan had set up emergency medical stations, and Alan had calmed the council enough to organize a proper response. When the crisis finally ended, the humans gathered again in their quarters, exhausted but satisfied. "I think we made an impression," Jack said, nursing a cut on his hand from broken debris. "Not the one the purists intended," Susan agreed. "They wanted to prove we were dangerous because we evolved on a deadly world." Alan nodded thoughtfully. "Instead, we proved something else entirely." "What's that?" Olivia asked. "That humans don't just survive crises," Alan said. "We thrive in them." Outside in the station, the aliens were coming to the same realization. These humans weren't just physically adapted to survive Earth. They were adapted to survive almost anything, and that made them either the most valuable allies in the galaxy or the most dangerous. The day after the crisis, Central Station was still in recovery mode. Emergency teams worked to repair damaged systems while medical personnel tended to the injured. The death toll was miraculously low thanks to quick action, but the station's sense of security had been shattered. Jack sat in a meeting room with High Counselor Varix and several security officials. The blue-skinned leader looked exhausted, the silver markings on his face dulled with stress. "We've identified the main perpetrators," Varix said. "A cell of the purist faction led by Trasnor. They gained access to the environmental controls through falsified credentials." "Have you arrested them?" Jack asked. Varix's eyes narrowed. "Trasnor and his followers have barricaded themselves in the diplomatic sector. They're holding hostages, including members of your delegation." Jack felt his stomach drop. "Who?" Ambassador Foster and Dr. Wright were attending a scientific conference in that section when the purists seized control. Jack stood immediately. "I need to get there." "Impossible," said a security official. "They've sealed all entrances and threatened to kill hostages if anyone attempts rescue." "What are their demands?" Jack asked. Varix's skin darkened. "They want all Earth representatives removed from the station and a permanent quarantine established around your solar system." Jack paced the room. "Where's Olivia?" Engineer Rivera was working on repairs in the outer ring when the attack occurred. "We lost contact with that section shortly after." Varix hesitated. "I must be direct, Mr. Miller. The purists fear humans more than we initially realized. They believe your kind represents an existential threat to the established order of the Confederation. Because we can survive in harsh conditions? Because you adapt too quickly. After yesterday's crisis, many species are both impressed and terrified by human capabilities. The purists are exploiting those fears." Jack moved toward the door. "I need to find Olivia and then rescue Susan and Alan." "How?" "The diplomatic sector is locked down. The atmosphere inside has been altered to levels that would instantly kill most rescue teams." Jack smiled grimly. "But not a human from Earth." While station security established a perimeter around the diplomatic sector, Jack made his way through maintenance tunnels toward the outer ring where Olivia had last been seen. The passageways were cramped and poorly lit, designed for maintenance, drones rather than humanoid species. After 20 minutes of crawling through increasingly narrow spaces, Jack heard a familiar voice. Following the sound, he found Olivia in a small control room, surrounded by disabled security drones. "Jack!" she exclaimed. "Thank goodness. The whole station's gone crazy. These security bots tried to detain me as a dangerous organism." "The purists have taken over the diplomatic sector," Jack explained quickly. "They've got Susan and Alan hostage." Olivia's expression hardened. "What's the plan?" "First, we need to access the station's systems without alerting the purists. Can you do that from here?" Olivia examined the control panels. "Maybe. These systems are different from the environmental controls, but the basic architecture should be similar." While Olivia worked, Jack checked his communication device. It showed emergency broadcasts throughout the station, but nothing from inside the diplomatic sector. "Got it," Olivia said after several minutes. "I'm into the surveillance system. Look." The screen showed the diplomatic conference hall. About 30 aliens of various species sat huddled on the floor, surrounded by armed purists. Susan and Alan were separated from the others, contained in what looked like a transparent bubble. They're in isolation fields, Olivia explained, probably to prevent contamination from the humans. Jack studied the layout. Can you get me schematics of the ventilation system? Already working on it. Olivia's fingers flew across the alien interface. Here. There's an access point 2 levels down that connects to the diplomatic sector. But Jack, they've altered the atmosphere in there. The oxygen levels are extremely low, and they've introduced gases that would be toxic to most species. What about humans? Olivia ran calculations. Uncomfortable but survivable for short periods. You'd have maybe 30 minutes before passing out. That'll have to be enough. Inside the diplomatic sector, Susan and Alan sat back to back in their containment field. The transparent bubble allowed them to see and hear what was happening, but prevented any physical interaction with their surroundings. They're monitoring the station's response, Alan whispered, waiting to see if their demands will be met. Susan nodded slightly. The irony is incredible. They're terrified of us because we evolved on a death world, but they're the ones threatening violence. Across the room, Traz Nor, the gray-skinned, four-armed leader of the Purists, was addressing his followers. The Council will see reason. These humans represent a fundamental threat to our way of life. They call their world Earth, but it is a crucible of death by our standards. What kind of creatures evolve in such conditions? Not peaceful ones. One of his lieutenants approached. The Council has rejected our initial demands. They're calling for immediate release of the hostages. Traz Nor's black eyes narrowed. Then, we must show them we're serious. He pointed to Susan and Alan. Prepare to transmit execution of the humans. The death of these two will convince the Council of our resolve. Susan felt her heart race, but kept her expression neutral. Alan maintained his diplomatic composure, though his hands were trembling slightly. Even if you kill us, Alan said calmly, Earth will send others. Traz Nor approached their containment field. No, Ambassador. After today, your planet will be permanently quarantined. The Confederation will establish a blockade around your entire system. Because you fear us? Susan asked. Because we understand you, Traz Nor replied. We've studied your planet's historical records. Your kind evolved through constant conflict with your environment, with other species, with each other. You are natural predators, uniquely adapted to hunt, kill, and conquer. You're misinterpreting our history, Alan argued. Humans are also adapted to cooperate, to solve problems, to help others, as you demonstrated during yesterday's crisis. Traz Nor made a sound like bitter laughter. That only proved our point. You function effectively in disaster conditions. What species evolves? Such a trait except one that faces constant threats? And what happens when you decide other species are those threats? Before Alan could respond, the lights in the conference hall flickered. Traz Nor barked orders to his followers, who rushed to check the control panels. The environmental systems are fluctuating, one reported. Stabilize them, Traz Nor commanded. I can't. Someone's overriding our controls. Susan glanced at Alan with a spark of hope in her eyes. Jack and Olivia. Throughout the diplomatic sector, confusion spread among the Purists as systems began behaving erratically. Doors opened and closed randomly. Communication devices emitted static. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, the atmospheric composition began to change. As the Purists struggled to maintain control of their systems, a figure moved silently through the ventilation ducts above them. Jack had navigated the narrow passages, using Olivia's directions, a breathing mask covering his face to help with the altered atmosphere. From his position, he could see Susan and Alan in their containment field. He could also see the increasing distress of the Purists as they struggled to breathe in the gradually changing atmosphere. What's happening? Traz Nor demanded, his gray skin turning ashen. The atmosphere. It's shifting to Earth normal, gasped one of his followers. Jack smiled behind his mask. Olivia was gradually introducing Earth's atmospheric conditions, higher oxygen, different pressure into the sector. For humans, it would feel like coming home. For the Purists, It was increasingly debilitating. As the purists weakened, Jack prepared to make his move. The station's normal security forces couldn't enter without risking their lives, but a human from Earth? This was exactly the kind of environment they had evolved to handle. Jack dropped from the ventilation duct into the conference hall, landing in a crouch. The purists, already struggling with the changing atmosphere, were slow to react. He moved quickly through the room, disabling the nearest guards with precise strikes. His months of security training, combined with years of military experience, made him far more effective than the purists had anticipated. "It's the other human," Trasnor shouted, his voice weak in the oxygen-rich air. "Stop him." Several purists moved to intercept Jack, but they were unsteady on their feet. The Earth-normal conditions that felt refreshing to Jack were increasingly debilitating to them. As he fought his way toward Susan and Alan, Jack heard Olivia's voice through his communication device. "I've almost got control of the containment fields. Keep them busy for 30 more seconds." Jack nodded, though she couldn't see him. He grabbed a decorative staff from the wall and used it to keep the remaining purists at bay. They were visibly struggling now, their movements sluggish as they tried to adapt to conditions humans found perfectly comfortable. With a soft hum, the containment fields around Susan and Alan dissolved. They immediately stood ready to help. "The control panel," Susan pointed across the room. "If we can release the door locks, station security can enter." Alan moved toward the frightened hostages. "Everyone stay calm. We're getting you out of here." Trasnor, seeing his plan collapsing, pulled out a small device. "Stop. This is linked to the station's atmospheric controls. One press and this entire sector decompresses." Jack froze, weighing his options. Even humans couldn't survive in vacuum. "You would die too," Susan said calmly. "Better than allowing your kind to contaminate the Confederation." Trasnor's forehands gripped the device tightly. Jack prepared to lunge forward, knowing he wouldn't reach Trasnor in time. But before anyone could move, the device suddenly sparked and went dead in the purist leader's hands. Through everyone's communication devices came Olivia's triumphant voice. "I've disabled it remotely. All station systems are back under central control." With the threat neutralized, station security forces entered the diplomatic sector, now that the atmosphere had been partially restored to safe levels for their species. The purists were quickly detained and medical teams arrived to treat the hostages. "You've made a terrible mistake," Trasnor said as security officers led him away. "Humans will destroy everything the Confederation has built." High Counselor Varix arrived as the situation was being secured. "On the contrary, they have saved it. Your actions have accomplished the opposite of what you intended, Trasnor. You've shown the entire Confederation that humans use their unique abilities to protect others, not threaten them." 2 days later, the human delegation stood before the full Confederation Council. The vast chamber was filled with representatives from all member species, their attention focused on the 4 humans at the center. High Counselor Varix addressed the assembly. "We must now decide Earth's status within the Confederation. The events of recent days have given us much to consider." For hours, representatives debated. Some voiced concerns similar to the purists, though less extreme. Humans evolved in conditions most found nightmarish. They were too physically resilient. They adapted too quickly to new situations. Others pointed to the humans' actions during both crises, how they had risked themselves to help others, used their unique capabilities for rescue rather than domination. When all had spoken, Alan stepped forward to address the council. "Honorable representatives," he began, "we understand your concerns. Earth is indeed different from your worlds. Humans have evolved in conditions that would challenge many of you. But consider this. What if that's exactly what the Confederation needs?" He gestured to his fellow humans. "You've seen what we can do in emergencies. You've witnessed our ability to function in conditions others find hostile. Now imagine those abilities in service to all species, not as a threat." Susan joined him. "Biological diversity strengthens ecosystems. So too will our differences strengthen the Confederation. We can go places others cannot." solve problems others find insurmountable. We don't want to conquer, Jack added. We want to contribute. Olivia stepped forward with a display device. I've designed modifications that would allow standard Confederation technology to be operated by any species, including humans. We can bridge the gaps between us. The council chambers buzzed with discussion. After a brief deliberation, High Counselor Varix rose. The council has reached a decision. Earth will be granted probationary membership in the Galactic Confederation, with full review after one standard cycle. During this time, human representatives will work with us to establish protocols for cross-species cooperation and emergency response. As the announcement was made, Jack noticed something surprising. The fear that had greeted their arrival was being replaced by something else in many of the alien faces. Curiosity, respect, even hope. 6 months later, Central Station had changed. A new section had been established, the Earth Embassy, where humans and other species could interact in comfortable conditions for all. Special environmental suits had been developed allowing aliens to visit Earth briefly, and human advisors had joined Confederation emergency response teams. Jack stood at a viewport, watching a group of alien tourists preparing for their first expedition to Earth. They were donning protective gear and receiving final instructions from their guide, Susan, who had chosen to remain on the station as a cultural liaison. Nervous? Jack asked one of the aliens, a slender being with iridescent skin. Terrified, the alien admitted, but also excited. Your world is said to be beautiful despite its dangers. Jack smiled. It is beautiful because of its dangers. They shaped us, challenged us to adapt and grow. Without them, we wouldn't be who we are. Alan joined them, now wearing the formal robes of Earth's first official ambassador to the Confederation. The shuttle is ready. Our visitors are about to experience their first sunrise over the Pacific Ocean. They'll never look at us the same way again, Jack said. That's the point, replied Olivia, who was busy installing her latest human-adapted technology in the station's systems. Understanding begins with experience. As the tourists departed for their journey to Earth, Jack thought about how much had changed. Humans had arrived as feared creatures from a death world, only to become valued members of a galactic community. The story Traz Nor had told about humanity, that they were dangerous predators shaped by a hostile world, wasn't entirely wrong. Earth had indeed forged humans through challenges and threats, but the purists had missed the most important lesson of Earth's evolutionary crucible. Those who survive the harshest conditions don't just become stronger, they become helpers. They learn to face dangers together, to protect one another, to turn survival into something more meaningful than mere existence. Earth wasn't the deadliest planet in the galaxy because it created monsters. It was the deadliest planet because it created humans, beings who could face the universe's greatest challenges and remain unbroken. And that, Jack realized as he watched the shuttle depart for Earth, wasn't something to fear. It was something the galaxy had been waiting for all along.